Hi, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in today. Fuel pump from a 582. The pilot brought this in and said, could you please check my fuel pump? This is my story. And he related to me that he was departing, taking off, wide open throttle, of course, and the engine started to lay down. So he thought enough to pull the power back a bit, and the engine picked up and continued to run. So he nursed it around without touching anything and came back in and landed again. And so now let's find out if his fuel pump is actually the problem. So let's test it on the bench. I'll be testing this fuel pump today using this gauge, which is any generic fuel pump pressure vacuum gauge will work fine. I like the big face on it, but it doesn't matter. So any type of a fuel pump tester, and I have just a generic piece of tubing here that I'm going to put this end on the pulse port, and the clean end is the one that I'm going to have in my mouth, and I'm going to apply pressure vacuum to here. And the only other tool is this little cap. So when we look at the arrows on here, this arrow here is out, so this goes to a carburetor, so I have it plugged up. And this one goes out, so it goes to the other carburetor. And this one comes in, so this one here comes from the fuel tank, the fuel supply. So let me get my gauge hooked up to the port, which is an out port. So any pressure is either going to come out this port, which is capped, or it's going to go here into our gauge. Okay, so let me get my pulse line on here. There we go. And here is the gauge. We can see it right there. Yes, we can. Okay, so let me apply some pressure vacuum on here. Well, I can hear the diaphragm moving. I think you probably could too, but there's zero output. So right now it's dry. So let me cover up the inlet from the fuel tank, because it can move air very easy. It has to do a little more work to move liquid. So I'll put a little restriction there with my thumb, and let's do the same thing again. So here we go. I'm gonna vacuum and pressure it again. Okay, so on the gauge, it was moving from 0 to 1 psi. So in actuality, I mean, that's not correct at all. This fuel pump is not working right at all. But that's what saved him, because he thought of pulling the power back, which actually matched the low flow of fuel that his carburetors were getting. He saved himself and his airplane, etc., etc. So hats off to that quick thinking on there. So just let me get another fuel pump, and let's do this exact same test. Here's the outlet and an outlet, and here's the inlet from the fuel tank. So this one is plugged, of course, and hook on there. So all the exact same setup. And I get the hose back on here. Now I'm not going to plug the inlet with my thumb this time, because it should work just the way it is. So let me do pressure vacuum on here again, and let's see what we get. So there we go. I got up to, I'd say 2 3/4 pounds. So that's pretty impressive, and it's holding. Right, it's not leaking down, so the valves in the fuel pump must be good. So this tests out as a good fuel pump, so that's nice. This one I haven't tested before. So let me remove this from, and we'll hear this There we go. Come off. Now, and we're back to 0. Okay, so at this point, we definitely know that this certainly, there could be more than one problem, because sometimes there is, but this would be the most obvious problem for his airplane to lay down, and the fact that, you know, when he pulled the power back, it kept running. So let's take this apart and find out what's going on with this thing. Now, before I dismantle this, I want to make sure that it goes back together in the same orientation. So what do I mean by that? Well, we'll see that this protrusion here lines up with this hole, and this protrusion lines up with that hole. So that's exactly the same. Okay, let's tip them over and see what we get. And, well, look at that. The pulse line is facing a different direction. So because I want to bring this fuel pump, or give this fuel pump back to the customer so he can just put it right back on the airplane, I need to make sure that everything goes back in the same place as far as the base goes, because it could fit multiple ways because it has a half dozen screws. And I've seen lots of them turn. So, you know, I can't assume that it's, you know, as in a factory position. So what I do is I mark them so that it always goes back the same way. So we have this protrusion right here, and I'm going to make, I use a little engraver, and I make a little mark right here so I can always index it back, because I could easily put this back together with it at that end, and then everything is going to be, the hoses are going to face the wrong way for this particular application. So got this old-fashioned Dremel here that I've had forever, and let's make a mark on here so we can reference that. Okay, so there we go. I made, where are we here? I made a little mark on it right here. You know, I mean, if I use marker, it's not going to last very long when I wash it, so I have to make something that's going to stay. So that's that part of it. So here we are on our last remaining screw. Let's get it out and find out what's going on. So we've got our mark that we made with the engraver there, and this boss protrusion sticking right out. So let's find out what we have in here. And here is one of the diaphragms. I don't know if you can see that. So it looks fine. I don't see any holes in it. And there is our gasket, and it is still not a problem. So no issue with this diaphragm or with that gasket. And oh, look at that. There's the problem right there. So this black right here, let me get this in the right place, is the back, is actually a rubber pin that holds this as a plastic disc, which is the valve. And the other one, the pointy end, should be coming through this hole right here, and here it is laying over here. So that should actually, when we take this apart, we should see that in that hole. So whenever we have parts rolling around in there, yeah, I think we located the issue. So it had a broken valve. Now, here, we'll just take this and put this back. So when I open this up, this is what I should see, is the one plastic valve, as they said here, this round disc, and then this is the rubber pin that holds it in, and then it's the same but from the other side, and this is the other end of this. So that means when this was off, I don't know exactly where it was, because every time you move it around, who knows where it's going to end up at, but now it's right, tip it over. At any rate, the main thing is it's broken. So let's get the broken piece out. Now, okay, so, all right, where's my camera? There we are. Okay, so the diaphragm stayed on there. So we have a gasket here that still is intact. Now, one of the other things that's very important is right in this block, there's a little teeny dot in the middle. It's the teeniest little hole, and that is so that if it gets any oil, slime, whatever in it, when it'll just come out. Gravity will let it drain out. So putting the fuel pump on this way could potentially be an issue, because if it gets anything down here, it's just going to fill up the cavity and it's not going to work. Whereas if it gets oil or something in here, then it's going to drip out and it's going to continue to operate. Because remember, this is the pulse line here from the engine. So if any vapor comes, it's all in the crankcase because that's how the engine is lubricated. If any vapor makes its way up the hose, depending upon the mount of this, and it happens to be on this way, the vapor, when it condenses into, like, say, a liquid, can't get out. So it has to be on with this at the bottom. Okay, now that part is fine. So now we should see, oh, it just fell off. I just touched it and it fell off. So let me see if I can pick this up. So this is the diaphragm from the far side. Here's our disc valve just laying there, and here is the head of, whoops. So here's the disc valve right here, and here's the head of that rubber retainer, the rubber pin that holds it in. So that head on that is the same as the head on right here. So this rubber is old and rotten, and that's why it came off. So do we see any issue with this valve? No, that's broke. And the diaphragm, it has these, I don't know what you call it. I don't know if you can even see it. They're like pebbly marks around here. I mean, this is like some old fuel pump. It's got a zillion years on it, I'm sure. Anyway, not a zillion, but lots. So it's very, very old. It should have been overhauled quite some time ago. But I will say I have found flies in here before, and all kinds of different dirt. And well, how can a fly get in here? Seriously, if I should find that picture somewhere, I saved it. But a fly gets in there because when what I believe happens is when you take the fuel cap off and then go fetch your gas can, etc., etc. If a fly flies by, it gets overcome by the fumes, falls into the gas tank, and I guess that's how it ended up in the fuel pump. It's the only way it could have got there. Anyway, enough about that. So we know what the problem is with this one, and so what we'll do now is we'll take this off, and that just fell off. Normally I can pull the whole unit out, the whole retainer out through there. Now what we really have to watch for when we're doing this is, and if this fuel pump is any good to even use again, is this face right around the outside here. Whoops. The face right around the outside, this has to be perfect. Because why? Because the little disc pushes against it, and that's what is the valve. So then we'll look at this side. This looks absolutely fine that way. So this is a rebuildable housing. So what I'm going to do now is get the gaskets off of this, and I will get it into the sonic cleaner, and it'll all be all nice and pretty and shiny, and then we'll put it back together. So this is my ultrasonic cleaner. Bought it online. It's a generic sort of a thing. Now they only really work properly, as far as I'm concerned, when you use the right cleaner in it. So this is really the right stuff. It works fabulous. So instead of, I tried this thing where you mix this with that and everything else. It turns things funny colors. I don't know what it does to the base metal and everything. No, that is the only thing that I've used forever now. So this is already heated up. I have it set to 120 degrees in Fahrenheit. It's already warm because I cleaned some other pieces, and we'll just drop these in. Now, one thing about the ultrasonic that's interesting, and I kind of see things like that quite often, is if these parts touch the bottom, it doesn't work properly. So how do I mean that? Well, it comes with a basket for a reason. You need to use the basket. So if I just take this and just drop it in the bottom, first off, it's hard to get out, and secondly, it's not going to clean properly. So there we go. Drop that in, put our lid on, and I'll set this for, I set it for 20 minutes. And we'll see how clean it is after. Should be looking like brand new. We're back 20 minutes later. Let's find out how nice these parts look. Isn't that amazing when you use the proper cleaner? How nice these parts come up. Lovely. Okay, so I'll get these out of here and I'll dry these off and we'll put the fuel pump back together. So all of my components are all nicely dried, nice and clean. I have all of the new components here, the two diaphragms, I know they're pretty hard to see, and the two valves and the two pins that hold the valves in. So we have two thin gaskets and two thicker gaskets. Now, as far as speaking of gaskets, if you didn't pay attention to where the two thick ones and the two thin ones were when you took this all apart, now you're going to be asking yourself, how do I figure this out? Well, here's a little reference picture. So this is the bottom and the top, I'll call it, and that's where the thick gaskets go. So in other words, the thick gasket goes against this part, and the thick gasket goes against that part. And then the center section, it gets a thin gasket on both sides. So that's just a quick reference there for that. And if you're ever doing a single one, it's the same idea because of the way it goes together as well. All right, now moving right along. So first thing we need to do is let's get our valves in our valve block here. And they're kind of hard to see. And here's one right here. Whoops, right there. Now, sometimes these, because they come off of a roll, I would imagine, then they have a little bit of a curve to them. We want to make sure that if it has a curve, that the curve goes in the correct direction. So let me grab a marker and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so what I mean is that it can be curved like that, and we want it to go on our seat. If we put it on the other way around, then the seat is going to be here, and here it's not going to want to seal as well as it should. So we're going to make sure that we see which way, if there is any wave to it, that the seat goes against the seat here, and then we install the little pin this way. So that way, in its natural state, when the rubber pin is in holding it, it's holding it closed and sealed. So just a little tip there. So I'm going to have a look at these guys and see which way, if there's a top and a bottom. And whoop. Well, there's a slight curve that way. So it's going to go on that way. Okay, so there it is. It's sitting there. I don't know if you can see the light reflect off it. Now, special tool again. there's ways you can try and do this without these tools. This is just a little bit of two-stroke oil in this veterinary syringe that I use all the time. So I'm going to put a little bit of oil on it to make it go in easier. So just put it on. Whoop, there we go. Just put a little bit of oil on there. Then this is a cool tool, this thing. So this is made for these Mikuni fuel pumps, specifically for these rubber pins. And you notice how it's the shape of it. It's got a little ball on the end. Fits right in there. Now that I've got, I'll just refresh the oil. I got a little bit of oil on there, just some two-stroke oil. Then I'm just going to come in here like this. I don't know if you can see, I've just centered it on there, and all I do is push. And look at that, it's through, no problem. Pull it out, valve installed, perfect. So let's flip it over. We'll move into, there it is right there. I would suspect that these came off, yeah, there's, okay, this will be the top. So we're going to put it on that way because it had just a teeny bit of a curve in it. I'll install the tool on the rubber, or vice versa, the rubber pin, a little bit of oil on it, and I'll start it in there and give it a push, and it's in. I don't know if you've ever done this before without the special tool. This makes it so easy. You definitely, if you've done this before, you're going to know how easy it is using this tool. So both of our valves are this valve, that valve, double check, make sure everything is in place, that this rubber is actually all the way through, so I can see the hole there. So we're good. Don't have to worry with those. That part's done. So what other thing that I use the oil for is I don't never put these gaskets together dry. So I just always put a little bit of oil on them and just give it a rub in. And when we're looking at these gaskets, of course, we see there's a difference. One is just a center. There's nothing in the center, and the other one is open. So let's get some more little oil on here. It soaks in reasonably quickly, actually. So not like there's a whole lot of, you don't need a bucket of oil, just a bit. And then this one's soaked in too, so I'll put a little more on this one. And there we go. So, yep, perfect. All right, now, wiper, there we go. Now this tool I'm going to store away, so it doesn't get damaged. I keep a little piece of fuel line over it, and it goes in a little pill jar, so that it's always in good shape when I go to use it again. Put that aside in my carburetor box. Cap up my oil. Okay, so the thick one, so what do we have for gaskets here? There's quite a difference. So the thick one, if you remember, goes against the outside pieces. So it's going to go on here now. We have to make sure that we don't put it on so that it's a mismatch right here. So make sure it goes on in the proper orientation. So there, it's going to go on like that. So that's the one for there. This one here, we can put this one on any way we want. So that one's going to fit on there. Now we need, so how I do this is I load this up with a couple of screws, and I forgot to clean the screws. Okay, let me go clean the screws. I'm back and I cleaned the screws. One other, just as a little note here, you see the little protrusion here and there. So they're trying to help you to make sure that you don't get it on backwards, but see, it'll still fit the wrong way with the protrusion in the right place. So make sure you look at this part to be sure. So I loaded everything up from this end, so I put 2 screws in like that, and I get a diaphragm, and I put the diaphragm on. You put the diaphragm on there. Then I load on. Now remember orientation as well. So yes, it's that way, but I want to make sure that I get the little protrusion at the right part. So these are really thin and you want to stretch them. Okay, so both of the little centerpiece is in the right orientation. So this is a check right there. So that's a check and that's fine. Now, how do I got 6 places where I can put this on. How do I know where it all goes to? Well, remember to begin with, we had this large protrusion and this small protrusion. So all we need to do is, well, let's see, okay, so let's say, oh, which way does it go? Well, it's easy which way it goes. See, nothing in the center here, crossbar here. So make sure that it all goes back the same way so that we see that this is going to match. We'll put these 2 screws in here. Okay, so there we go. Right now, we used another thin gasket. Remember, this one doesn't have an up or a down or anything else. It just fits on. And another diaphragm goes on there, like that. Okay, so we've already checked our valves before. We know that the valves are perfect. And then we're going to just drop this gasket on top here. So I've got the whole pump assembled so that the reason I do it this way is if you start to put it together and you go to push the screw through the hole, you may jam it on the edge of the diaphragm and then it's not going to work right. So now let's go back to before we marked this. Remember, we had these 2 protrusions here and then I marked it with the little engraver there because we want this in the same orientation when it goes back together. So I'm just trying to get, okay, so those are started by finger. Now I'm going to start all the other ones the same way. If there's any reason these screws don't want to go in, like they get hung up on something, then I want to stop and have a look, because they should really pretty much, little jiggling, they should go right through the hole. Because I don't want to grab as I said, I don't want to grab the diaphragm or a gasket and shred it or twist it or anything like that. Okay, so there we go. Then I can have I'm just looking around to make sure everything is still in place. Nothing's folded or caught. Okay, now I'm going to pinch it together and I run these down just finger tight for now, and then I'm going to tighten them up or tighten them down. In Canada we say tighten it up, and in the US it's tighten it down. So we all speak English, but some things are backwards or different, and that's cool. Okay, so just like tightening the anything else that's like with a pattern like this, like a wheel on a car. So I'm going to go to that one, and I'm going to skip one, going around clockwise, and then I'm going to that one that I missed the first time. Then this one, that one, start again. So I've never found an actual torque for these guys. However, hopefully if you're doing something like this, you should have a feel. I don't know, it's hard to describe. You should have a feel for what tight is. And that is tight. And so is that. Okay, I'm all happy with that. All right, so let's rig up our test equipment again and find out if it passes the quality control inspection. And before you carry on, and it's important is when you're looking at those little valves, make sure if it's flat, well, put it on either way, on either side that you want. But if it has any type of a bow to it, the high point goes up in the middle, so that it's closed automatically. Instead of, we certainly don't want the seat to be here and the little rubber pin is in the center like that. Whoops. And it's in there like this. That's not what we want, because then it's not going to seal here on either side. Okay, enough of that. So let's put our this is on one of the ones that the out, so we're going to do this exactly the same as before. That's an out to a carburetor. It's plugged. This is an out. So our tester is going to go on, our pressure gauge is going to go on there, and then we're going to put it right there and put that on. And okay, I'll hold this up. And now, of course, I don't have this blocked off for the inlet, because you shouldn't have to do that to make it make pressure. So this is a good test like this. And then, okay, let's apply some pressure vacuum and see what we get. Here we go. Nice. Okay, not holding though. So how come? Let's find out. Okay, so I'm going to take this apart again because it's not holding and it has to hold. So what's going on? This is why we need to test these after we do any kind of work on these, because just because all the parts are brand new, which they are, then what's the issue? What I think it may be is there could be a teeny little speck that is actually sitting on one of the valves. They're difficult to handle, and because they're so little, and you never know, it might have picked up a little something on it. Okay, we'll put those aside. And we'll put the cap aside. We'll leave the screws in it because we'll be putting this back together. And well, do I see? I don't see anything around there. I'm going to go put it under the magnifier, and I'll be back in a sec. So I didn't see anything under the magnifier. So I'm just putting a little drip of oil in here on the back side of the valve. And no, I don't see any leakage there. If there's something there, it is so teeny that I'm not seeing it at all. I'm just rotating these a little bit where I can get at it. No, I don't see any issue with that at all. Okay, well, that's why we do these tests, just to make sure. So it all looks perfect. I don't see anything there. Okay, well, let's put it back together and go from there. Like, I want this to make pressure, yes, but I want it to hold pressure. So same procedure again, line up the, make sure that everything is facing the right way as far as the little twist in there goes in the middle. Okay, that's good. And remember, the thin gasket goes against the valve pack, the valve body as I call it. There we go. Whoop. And that gasket. So I've assembled it all this way. I'm going to re-index my little mark that is right there. And put that in by hand. Finger tight. Start it with my fingers. There we go. Right, when we're doing something that's like this, we can't just put one screw in and tighten it up because we'll never get the rest of them in. But I've seen some people try and do that. I don't quite understand that, but anyway. So it's still free to move. I'm just going to examine all the way around, make sure I didn't snag anything. Same as before. No, I did not. All right. So tighten up. Finger tight. Just get them down to 0. Then we'll tighten them up or down. And we'll test it again. Okay, so I'm going to use the same approach. Remember, we got to offset these just like we were tightening up a wheel. Skip one. And I go up here, but anyway. Okay, here we go. So again, as far as torque goes, I just do it by feel. Yep, that's nice. Okay, so let's cap up our oil. And now we'll get this back on an outlet. So here's an outlet. We'll put that on that. Cap that one that would normally go to the carburetor. Let's get that on. That back on, and let's find out what we get now. Well, I got it to, what does it show? To 2 PSI, pretty much. And that's as far as I could get it, and it's holding. And same again. Let's do third time here and see what we get. And 2 pounds. So if you remember from the video before that I did on the fuel pumps, that's very acceptable on the bench. So that's it. That's a wrap. This one's ready to go back on the airplane. And of course, I've advised him to, when he puts this back on, of course, to, tie it to a tree or a fence or whatever and do a really good long run up and make sure that this was the only problem. Typically, there usually is only one thing wrong, but you never know. And if the airplane isn't running right, tie it to a tree and let it run at full power until you're happy that it's going to keep running. Well, I hope you found this video interesting. Not very often that we have one of these that's actually broken. I mean, normally these have the durability of a sledgehammer. This one, amazingly, right, it still would make some fuel pressure and some flow, even with a broken valve. So that's pretty amazing, isn't it? I recommend that these pumps be cleaned, overhauled, new gaskets, kit in it every 300 hours or 5 years. I'm sure, I mean, we could check the fuel pressure when we do our annual maintenance, but I'm sure the fuel pressure from this one was fine right up until the valve fell off. So, this could have, potentially this could have come out of a maintenance inspection with a check mark beside the fuel pump because it had good fuel pressure, and then this broke. So maintenance on these pumps, yes, right? So let's not just forget about them because it just always works. So 300 hours, 5 years, I think it's done its time quite successfully at that point. Let's overhaul it. or if you can't overhaul it, then replace it. Whatever you need to do, whatever suits your ability to do things. Anyway, thanks so much for tuning in today, and have a great, safe flight next time you're out. And oh yeah, and of course the usual, like, share, subscribe, all those other things. Thanks. Bye now.